Welcome back, and here we go again. My apologies, folks. It looks like there have been some internet issues that have been crashing the server. Was out of our control. We just got a notification, but now everything seems to be up and running. So we're going to get straight into it. Greg Brown is our guest for tonight. He is trying to log on. It looks like he's got some issues, and he's located in New South Wales, so it can't be a local thing. Can't be exclusively a local thing. But look, we're going to jump straight into what is happening. What are some of the things happening locally in the World Game? But first of all, let's have a look at what's making news as well. This is in today's paper, Brilliant Bailey's hat trick, and there's some comments from the coaches. So that was an article about the Barwon versus Bell Park local derby. Barwon coach Dale Harris, the victorious coach, his team won 4-1 over the weekend. And his comments, the lads who stepped in today for the missing 5 players played the system very well. Huge credit to Bell Park, who kept on knocking on the door and were rewarded in the end with a goal. As for my boys, I couldn't be happier with the team. His counterpart, Bell Park coach Michael Spazewski, on the wrong end of a 1-4 scoreline, said the following: "It was a day to forget for us. After playing some very good competitive football in the last few weeks, we failed to turn up today. We failed to compete in the first half. We failed to match Barnes' energy, and as a result, we found ourselves 2-0 down. To add to that, we missed a penalty right before halftime. The second half was a bit better, but we failed to deal with Barnes' forwards, and in the end, conceded 2 more goals." Over the weekend and last Friday, some of the other articles that had appeared: Vandals hamper battling Rangers, which is something we tackled last week right here on the Game of Two Halves podcast when we had our special guest, Geelong Rangers president Tim Santalucia, talking about the vandalism that had, engulfed Myers Reserve. Coasters relish Crunch Knights duel. It was a big game preview there between the Surf Coast and Moonee Valley Knights State 4 clash, the second versus third. Former Warrior inks deal at Croatian club. Local boy Anthony Leban, who was formerly with the North Geelong Warriors, has signed a professional contract with a Croatian third-tier team, and there was a story about that. Now we've got some big news. Young Anthony will be a guest on this Wednesday night's Oz Crows Soccer Show podcast, the sister podcast to the Game of Two Halves. He will be on that. It will be simulcast live on the Geelong Region Soccer Show Soccer News Facebook page as well. That will be happening this Wednesday night, 8:30. And for those of you who aren't Croatian, don't despair. The show is completely in English. So there's that as well happening. Now, speaking of vandalism, well, today we've just found out another local soccer club has been subjected to some vandals or have been the victims of vandalism. Hume Reserve in Bell Park. In fact, Hume Reserve pitch number 3. Obviously, this is someone who doesn't like the floodlights being switched on around the suburban area. If you can look very, very closely, it looks like the cupboard has been pot riveted. So earlier tonight, this is the switchboard, the actual floodlight switchboard. It's been screwed shut, or it's been pot riveted. So the juniors that were supposed to be using the lights tonight were not able to do so. And that's more stupidity happening around our community at the moment. And also, we're going to talk a little bit later on about the World Cup. But look, if we go straight to the World Cup, what happened last Thursday? There's a snippet of the crowd at the Sydney Olympic Stadium. 75,784. That's a record. It eclipsed the previous record that was at Marvel Stadium just days earlier. But that is a phenomenal achievement. And also the TV ratings as well was a bonanza as well for Channel 7. The World Cup, as it looks at the moment in Group B, where our Matildas are currently sitting pretty on top of the competition standings there after round one by courtesy of their 1-0 win over Ireland. And then we've got Canada, and we've also got Nigeria. They're on 1 point apiece. They drew in their game 0-0. And this Thursday at 8 p.m, Australia taking on Nigeria in the second round match as well. It's a bit of a decent break between the two games, exactly a week. And that's going to be happening a bit later on this week. So lots of football action coming your way this week, leading into the weekend as well. So that's going to be very, very exciting. Look, folks, we're going to take a very, very short break. When we return, we'll be speaking to Greg Brown. Looks like Greg is now getting ready in the green room. So we'll be speaking to him. Former Matildas coach. He coached from 1997 to 1993. And we'll talk about what it was like coaching the Matildas then, and what was it like trying to get a publicity and profile for the Australian national women's team back in the late 90s, and what it's like now. Certainly times have changed, and boy, have they changed in a big way. Apologies once again about our little interruption earlier tonight, but we're back on deck and we're raring to go. So, folks, don't leave us yet. We've got plenty more to come. And as we mentioned just before we were interrupted with the internet connection earlier, a big shout out to a couple of the businesses that have jumped on board as business advertisers: Harcourts North Geelong and Macron Sports Melbourne as well. A big thank you to Joe from Harcourts and Gianluca from Macron. We'll be back.
Hi, I'm Joe Gergich.
And I'm Helena Fentella.
And welcome to our family here at Harcourts.
Welcome back to the global game. It's an absolute pleasure to have you back on the show, and hopefully we're able to get Greg Brown as well on here now. Greg, can we hear you?
I can hear you.
There we go.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. You're pretty quiet, but I think I can hear you.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I can definitely hear you, and I can see you as well. great to have you on the show, Greg. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Game of Two Halves. We've had a little bit of a wretched start thanks to the wonders of modern technology. Us here in Geelong and you up in New South Wales. And speaking of New South Wales, what are you doing these days? And let's talk a little bit about Greg Brown. First of all, what are you doing these days? And we'll talk about what happened back in the 90s and prior to that.
Well, these days, mate, I'm the technical director at North Coast Football, which is based in northern New South Wales, just in the Coffs Harbour region. And I look after the regional coach education and the the elite sort of junior pathways for the
awesome,
region.
Mate. Now you were born in Manchester, then you came out to New Zealand before coming out to Australia to play for the then known Parramatta Melita Eagles, and you also were played in the old now defunct National Soccer League with West Adelaide Hellas. Now you played for the New Zealand international team, but you also played for the Australian national team. How is that possible? Do tell us.
Yeah, look, I'm pretty sure the rules are sort of similar today. That if you represent the country in a friendly game, in other words, if it's not an A-class international, then it's not really classed as a cap or as a true international game. So back in the early 80s, there was a visiting Russian side, and we played a friendly series against them. When I say Russian, they're actually the Soviet Union. And we played some friendly internationals against them that were not classed as A internationals. So when I came to Australia, I found I was actually eligible to play for Australia as well.
Oh, brilliant! Well, there you go. That explains it then, I guess. Now, after your playing career, so you then ended up playing West Adelaide Sharks, or Hellas as I know, 1992 to 94. Then 96 through to 2003 was in Mitchelton, where you finished your career. That's in New South Wales, is that correct?
Yeah, no, actually, that's in Queensland, up in Brisbane. That was a strange one. I went up to Brisbane to sign for the Brisbane Strikers in the old National Soccer League, and part of the contract there was that I was also the Queensland Academy of Sport coach. And just when I signed and I started coaching and training with the Strikers, it became obvious to me that I just couldn't commit myself to both. So I decided to focus on the coaching. Because I realised at 32, 33, I probably wasn't going to play for Australia anymore. I'd done everything really in the National League that I could do. I could have played a few more years without a doubt, but I wanted to focus on the coaching. So I started coaching with the Queensland Academy of Sport, the men's and women's program. And in my spare time, I played for Mitchelton.
I was going to say, so that was where your first forays into coaching women happened at the Queensland Institute of Sport. Is that right?
Yeah. I was there initially as the men's coach, and after about a year or so, the director asked me if I could oversee the women's program as well, which I did, and then. Once I started to get involved in the women, Tom Samani, who was the Matilda's coach at the time, asked me if I would like to assist him with the national team. And being a young coach, I thought that was probably a good idea, give me a bit more experience. So I took on that role. But very shortly into that, Tom actually left to go to Japan to coach in the J League then. So the position for the Matildas coach came up around that time, and I applied and got the job.
Yeah, now, obviously, late 90s, 97 to 99 was a different era than it is now. And obviously, you look at we look at the 75,000. What was it? 75,000 attendance last Thursday. There it is, 75,784.
Yeah, Thursday. Yeah.
A record home crowd, and a week prior to that, there was a record crowd here in Melbourne. It's just a completely different situation. And today, we've got the president of Galaxy United later on in the show, MARINA KRASIC, and that's a good example of a female football club that's just giving so many opportunities to girls and females and women. But back then it was a different story. How did you find coaching girls, talented girls at the QIS, and then later on the women's national team? How was it if you compare it to these days, I suppose? Oh, we've just lost you there. Hello. We just seem to have lost Greg. We're going to have to try and get him back on. Hello, Greg. Have we got you? Looking like some bad internet on Greg's side. Hello, Greg. Can we hear you?
Yeah, it was a different story, and we were probably at the beginning of what you. Yeah, the QAS. Look. Yeah.
Yep, we've lost you. Looks like unfortunately we lost him.
Well, yeah, we were sort of at the start of the beginning of the professional game, if you like, for the females, and it all started with the Sydney Olympics in 2000. So I was the national team coach in '97. And by that stage, we obviously had learned that the women's soccer was going to be in the Olympics in 2000. And so there was funding then for the sport to make sure that we give a good showing, during the Olympics. So what we did back in '97, with the money we had, we started the first ever full-time women's program for the national team at the AIS in the Australian Institute of Sport. And so we started a national soccer league by then, which was just only consisted of the Queensland Academy of Sport, Victoria Institute of Sport, West Australia Institute of Sport, South Australia Sports Institute, and we formed a national league for all the elite players to play in. It was only, it was only obviously a small competition then with a few teams, but we did manage to get the best players playing against each other. And we did have funds to now start to play a serious amount of international games. So we started the girls in at the AIS early '97, and we set ourselves a goal to play 30 internationals before the World Cup in '99. Because what we found was that our players had an average.
Sorry, folks, it looks like we are having some seriously bad internet issues, and not so much from our end, it would appear. It appears from Greg's end, and he has been trying to log on and get on touch throughout, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. Look, we're going to take a very, very short break. Hopefully when we return, we can rectify some of these technical issues. Otherwise, unfortunately, we might just have to go on to the local game segment, because we do have our guests, MITCHELL VIALS, former president and co-founder of FC Leopold, and MARINA KRASIC, the current president of Geelong Galaxy. They are backstage and ready to join us. So, folks, don't go away. It is the Game of Two Halves. We'll be back.
Our name is derived from the Greek prefix, macro, large. From the day we were born, this has been a promise for the future. We have grown through dedication, sweat, self-denial, faithful to our mission of being on the side of those who put themselves on the line. Through our name, we celebrate the greatness of those who believe there are no obstacles higher than their dreams. The courage to get back up after falling. The obstinacy of believing until the end. These are the values embedded in our logo. The Macron Hero. It's a celebration of sacrifice and tenacity. Up until your personal victory, until your arms are in the sky. Become your own hero.
Welcome back to the Game of Two Halves, folks. We are running a little bit late, unfortunately, tonight, and that is all due to some technical issues that we've been having. We're going to try and get Greg Brown back on the show. Greg, are you there now? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
I can now. I can. Okay, let's get back into it straight away because just before the interruption, and we are besotted by internet problems tonight. We're talking about back in the late 90s and how things have changed. Now, look, Amy Taylor was one of the players there, and probably just after you got back. You finished up coaching. Back in those days, that was how the Matildas were able to get some sort of a profile, posing in bikinis on sports magazines, a nude calendar. That would have happened after you finished up. Is that right?
Yeah.
Was it sort of a cringy thing for you at the time, or was it just how it was back then? The old adage of sex sells, but obviously you can't do that today. But
yeah, look, that nude calendar would never have happened if I was still there.
Yep. Hello. Yeah, take us to what was happening back in those days.
No, mate. Yeah, look, it definitely was cringeworthy afterwards.
Yeah.
It would never have happened while I was playing, while I was coaching. There's no way I would allow that to happen. It caused massive divisions among the players, the nude calendar. But yeah, look, Amy Taylor, I gave her a debut back in early 98, 97. Amy Dugan now, as you know her. Look, back in those days back in those days, the players were only training once or twice a week. We took them into a full-time program. That was the money that came from the Sports Commission, which was there for the Olympics in 2000. That's how we got the funding together to put together a full-time program, which was the first full-time program that the Matildas ever had. And it enabled us to get lots of international games in before the World Cup in '99. And then the 2000 Olympics. Amy was part of that. She was one of a number of young players. We had a lot of young players with potential. We had a lot of older players who weren't used to the rigors of professional football back then. So it was a bit of a mismatch, but we knew on the horizon we had lots of young girls who were going to eventually, with the right program, be the kind of Matildas they are today.
Yeah, well, we saw that snippet there. Thankfully, things have moved on, and for the former Matildas are able to get a really good foothold in the industry, in the football industry now. Whether it's coaching and whether it's like Amy Dugan there, as you said, used to be called Taylor. She's now a Fox Sports presenter, and it's great to see. That there are credible now positions for former players, not just women, but male players as well. And we see that now, whether it's in the media, whether it's in the coaching, whether it's in football administration as well. So thank God things have moved on and we are in a far, far better position. If we look at the current World Cup, Greg, well, first of all, your take on the Matildas last week. You were at the game. Tell us all about the atmosphere, the build-up, the actual game. Remembering Sam Kerr, our greatest footballer, wasn't even in the team, unfortunately, due to injury.
Yeah, look, the atmosphere was fantastic. I think the build-up was perfect prior to finding out that Sam Kerr wasn't available. I think that probably would have come as a shock to everybody in the camp. But, the Matildas have done it before. They've played without her before. They gave a good account of themselves. I'm not saying they underestimated Ireland, but I think we're all sort of surprised about how well they played. They certainly came out with a game plan to frustrate Australia, and they certainly did that. And at the end there, they could have even pinched one. So, I think, and we're seeing this across the World Cup now, which is fantastic, that a lot of the underdogs are actually coming out and giving a good account of themselves. We've seen it every day now that some of the lesser ranked teams are actually coming and giving the higher ranked teams a game. Canada could only get a draw. Against Nigeria and Australia's next game is going to be another tough one. So there's no easy games in this comp, and it's just a credit to all the women's nations, women footballing nations across the world. What a great job they've done with the female players over the last few years, that we've now come to a point where There's 32 teams in the World Cup, and they're all giving a good account of themselves.
They are indeed, and some of the scores. New Zealand making history, first World Cup win ever, 1-0 over Norway. That was also last Thursday.
That was massive.
Yeah, on Friday we had Nigeria and Canada 0-0, Philippines 0, Switzerland 2. Then Spain defeated Costa Rica 3-0. On Saturday, the US, a highly fancied US team, 3-0 winners over Vietnam. Japan 5-0 over Zambia, and England had a very tough time, the current European champions, 1-0 over Haiti. And then we saw Denmark defeat China 1-0. Yesterday, Sweden defeated South Africa 2-1. Netherlands 1-0 winners over Portugal. And France and Jamaica played a 0 all draw. Now, one of our loyal viewers, Santino Mamone, who tunes in every week, he's very happy that Italy defeated Argentina 1-0. And if the men can't do so well for the Italians, at least the women are. And Germany at the moment, well, they are really they're smashing it at the moment. I think it's 6-0 as we speak, and Brazil and Panama coming on a little bit later on. So that's the latest with regards to the World Cup. Greg, there's talk that Sam Kerr's injury may actually be a little bit more serious than thought, and that she may miss more than just the first two matches. Have the Matildas got enough depth to cover her absence? Or is that going to be a very, very, I mean, it is going to be a very big blow, but how big of a blow?
Look, to be honest, with or without Sam Kerr, I think that their oppositions, they're going to be tough games with or without Sam. Obviously, Sam would be a massive plus, but you play against a team like Ireland, who'd really locked Australia up. Sam wouldn't have found much space there. I think against a team like Nigeria, Canada, teams that will maybe come at Australia a bit more, there'll be a bit more chance to get in behind them. But, you know, depending who they play against, you know, it's going to be a tough challenge either way. It'd be devastating for Sam and for the players if she doesn't get to play in this World Cup. That would just be, you know, a real crying shame. And the result you mentioned earlier with Germany, it's probably the only blowout we've had.
Yeah.
You know, if you go back to France in 2019, there was some big scores like that, you know, in every round. Now we're only seeing it, you know, 1 or 2 games where there's a high score, which just shows that whoever you're playing against, they've really got their act together now. They're getting good coaching. The girls have got great technique and fitness. They understand the game. So yeah, look, without Sam, it's going to be tough, no doubt about it. With Sam, it's still going to be tough, but obviously she's a game breaker. She can pull something out of the ordinary, and you know, if you're going to win a World Cup, you need players like that. So we need Sam on board. Let's hope she's back on as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And on that note, we're certainly going to wish her all the very best in her recovery, and wish you all the very best, Greg, with your TD Technical Director role up there at North Coast Football. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for your patience. It was hard. Eventually, we did get you on, and it was certainly well worth the wait.
Yeah, look, good on you. Good on your show. It's great to see people like yourself promoting the game, mate, and getting behind it. And anytime you need me, I'll be there. Thanks.
Good on you. Greg Brown, former Matildas coach back in 1997 through to 1999. Folks, we're going to take a very, very short break. We are running a little bit behind schedule. When we return, it's time for the local game. There's a lot of things happening in the local game. Don't go away. It's the Game of Two Halves. Welcome back to the Game of Two Halves. It is time now for the local game, and let's have a look at what's happening on the local fields. But before we do that, when they say as you get older, you get wiser, and I guess, well, for one particular local sportsman, he's not local anymore, but he used to be quite well known locally. I think he's come to his senses after his post-playing days, after his post-professional days. I'm talking about an AFL footballer by the name of Stephen Motlop. Remember him? He used to play for the Geelong Cats. He's now taken up the round ball code. Well done, Mr. Motlop. Fantastic. Well, he made his Premier League debut for team up in Northern Territory, Casuarina. So a former AFL player, Steve Motlop, made his football Northern Territory Premier League debut tonight for Casuarina. The former Geelong and Port Adelaide player took his place in the Casuarina team against Darwin Hearts FC. There you go. Well done, Stephen. People come to their senses and they turn to the real game, the world game. Well, let's have more of that. And hopefully, with the Women's World Cup, we'll have many more converts to the local game as well. That would be to the world game. That would be absolutely fantastic. Well, let's start our weekend review with the National Premier League and see what happened in the National Premier League. Well, I had the pleasure, I guess, or frustration, if you like, of calling this game on the weekend. North Geelong taking on Heidelberg United. That game was played at Alco Park. North Geelong had the numerical advantage in the second half. Heidelberg United was reduced to 10 men after a red card just before halftime. Unfortunately, the Warriors weren't able to capitalise and they weren't able to get the full 3 points. They only managed to get 1 point, enough to get them off the bottom of the competition standings as Moreland City lost, but not enough to now get them out of the relegation zone. This Saturday, they take on St Albans Dynamo, their sister club. That will be at Churchill Reserve Saturday afternoon at the unusual time of 4 p.m. And it is a must-win game. North Geelong wins it. They will leapfrog St Albans out of the relegation zone. And we had last night on the Football Out West show, another sister podcast of the Game of Two Halves. We caught up with Tom Gavran, the coach of North Geelong Warriors, and this is a little snippet of what he had to say.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a really good insight on where St Albans are at and what they've been doing down to a T. Is there any thoughts about these clubs, you guys included in the lower places on the table that, if there is the National Second Division kicking off next season, that the relegation won't actually take place this year? And is that something that people are talking about behind the scenes?
To be honest, we haven't mentioned that not once within the change room. So, I do know there's some whispers, but we want to survive on merit and survive on merit. And you're sort of setting yourself up to fail, even in the long run and next year. If it was to be the case that we survive, so we want to survive on merit. And the last time the club was in the top flight in 2017, they went straight back down again. So we want to create a bit of history and, be that team that does stay up. Sort of been using that as a bit of motivation for the boys. Always try and go into games with a bit of a theme to motivate the boys. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it gives you a bigger lift than other weeks. But I'm big on motivation and trying to tap into the mental side of things.
That was an excerpt from an interview on last night's Football Out West show. If you'd like to watch the full replay of that, go over to the Football Out West show YouTube channel and you'll be able to take in just the interview. There is a video there of just the interview with North Geelong Warriors coach Tom Gavran. The Warriors will have to do without the services of their robust defender, Nikola Jurkovic, who unfortunately copped a red card after the final whistle, after he remonstrated with his believed the Heidelberg United coach, George Katsakis. I think I've got that right. So that is going to be a thrilling game this weekend coming. In NPL 3 action, Geelong went down to Boroondara Kerry Eagles 3-2. And as a result, Geelong find themselves now in a three-way battle for the relegation spot. Well, a three-way direct battle because Essendon Royals and Ballarat City also have 17 points. Ballarat City, they are the danger side. Former Geelong player Michael Trigger, who's gone back to Ballarat to coach Ballarat City, has basically taken the team that was destined for the wooden spoon and on the verge of escaping the relegation zone. They have actually won their last 4 games. Now, this Saturday night at Stead Park, Geelong's got a monumental task ahead of it when it hosts top team Melbourne Victory. This is going to be a very difficult game for them. But while there's hope, there's hope. On to State League 1, Corio. Well, Corio defeated Whittlesea Rangers 1-0 at home on Saturday. A goal by Angel, the Romanian import. That's lifted Corio. It's maintained their spot just outside the relegation zone, but times are very, very tense and very tough at the bottom of the Victorian State League 1 ladder because Bunyul City also won on the weekend. So they've got the same amount of points as Corio, but an inferior goal difference. Corio travels to Estuary Reserve this week, and Ivan Biskin's men will be taking on Yarraville Glory, who have had a little bit of a patchy mid-season. Win one week, lose another week. Let's hope Corio can get Yarraville on one of their off days. Moving along to State League 2, and there we have it. Geelong Rangers on the weekend had a very good win over Westvale Olympic, talking about teams in the mid-table. Connor Redden and Harry Waugh scored for the Rangers, a great victory at home, and that now pushes Geelong Rangers into 9th spot. They've got a game in hand against Mill Park, and although Layla United are 7 points clear of Rangers, the most important thing is that Geelong Rangers can distance themselves from the bottom two. That would be the ideal situation, the ideal scenario. This week, Rangers travel to Kevin Flint Reserve to take on Albion Rovers. Albion Rovers currently in 3rd spot, so it will be quite a difficult game, this one for them. Nonetheless, I'm sure that they're capable of doing putting up a good show. Moving on to State 4, lots of action happening in State 4. This is a really interesting division. Obviously has a lot of the Geelong teams in it, Surf Coast, Bowen and Bell Park as well. But with this one, if there's some footage from the Surf Coast Moonee Valley Knights game that was held on the weekend. The Moonee Valley Knights, they took an early lead. In fact, at half-time, they were leading 2-0. And then late in the game, well, with 5 minutes to go of just regulation time, John Pikett, the league's leading goal scorer, he managed to pull one back. That was in the 85th minute. And then Chris Jamard in the 95th minute scored an unbelievable equaliser, incredible equaliser. And you see the footage shortly. And the Surf Coast bench and the supporters just went absolutely berserk. About to see Pikett's goal. Across town, meanwhile, Bowen taking on Bell Park at Grovedale Reserve. Bowen defeated Bell Park 4-1. Milton Bailey was the star of the show. He scored a hat-trick to take his impressive season's tally to 18 goals. This week, Bowen hosts Barnstoneworth United at home. Bell Park travel to top team Laverton on Saturday night. That game's at 6 p.m, while Surf Coast will be travelling to Truganina, and their game kicks off at 7 p.m. So there you go. You can see the crazy scenes erupting at Banyul Warri Reserve. Without a doubt, it was crazy, that's for sure. Having a look at the ladder there in State 4, Surf Coast are in 2nd spot still by virtue of a far superior goal difference, but Moonee Valley Knights are breathing down their neck. And remember, it's the top team automatically gets promoted. The second team in this competition, they then progress to a playoff against the second team in State League 4 in the Northern Division. The winner of that then takes on the 3rd last placed team in State League 3 Northwest. So a lot to play for in the remaining 4 games. Bowen in 6th position, Bell Park in 7th position. Things are really, really tight there, that's for sure, no doubt about that. Moving along to State 5. Surfside Waves, it was only their 2nd win of the season. They defeated bottom side Tane United, 2 goals by Noah Mujica, ensured that the Waves were able to get off the bottom of the competition standings or 2nd last place and move out of the bottom 2. Now, being State League 5, it's the lowest run of the Football Victoria competitions. There is no relegation in State 5, thankfully, but you certainly don't want to finish on the bottom or 2nd last. Deakin have also had a bit of a tough time this year. They went down to Bendigo City 3-2, while Lara United had the bye. This weekend coming up, Surfside Waves are at home to Melton Phoenix, who are third. That game at Jarred Reserve on Saturday kicks off at 3 p.m. Deacon's got the bye, and Lara United are at home to Wyndham. That game is at 6 p.m. at Lara Recreation Reserve. So definitely Lara United will be looking to win to more or less solidify their spot in the top 5. And that brings us to the end of the men's side of things. So we're going to take a very short break. When we return, we'll be then looking at the women's side of the state league competitions as well as the local leagues, and then we'll have our first guests on. First of our 2 local guests on a little bit later on.
Our name is derived from the Greek prefix macro, large. From the day we were born, this has been a promise for the future. We have grown through dedication, sweat, self-denial, faithful to our mission of being on the side of those who put themselves on the line. Through our name, we celebrate the greatness of those who believe there are no obstacles higher than their dreams. The courage to get back up after falling. The obstinacy of believing until the end. These are the values embedded in our logo. The Macron Hero. It's a celebration of sacrifice and tenacity. Up until your personal victory, until your arms are in the sky. Become your own hero.
Welcome back to the Game of Two Halves. It's the local game segment that we are looking at now as well. So let's turn our attention to the women's VPL competition and featuring one of our guests tonight, Geelong Galaxy. A good result on the weekend, a 5-0 win over Melbourne University. Shian Razali scored 2 goals. That takes her season tally to a very impressive 13 goals. Alicia Laffey scored also, as did Beth Taylor. But Aya Sano only scored 1 goal this week in the 58th minute, but that takes her impressive season tally to 26 goals from 16 matches. Wow, absolute gun she is, doing very well. Galaxy have certainly solidified their spot in the mid-table. They're in 6th position after 17 rounds with 27 points. Although mathematically they probably could, maybe they could get a promotion spot, but highly unlikely. But nonetheless, it's a very good showing, that 6th position. Next week, they take on Ringwood City, which is going to be a tough game. That's at Hume Reserve, round 18 fixture, that at kicking off at 3 p.m. So that should be a great game, that one. And let's look at the Victorian Women's State League 1 competition, the Northwest. 3 Geelong teams in this division. Firstly, North Geelong on the weekend defeated Brunswick Zebras 2-0. Bottom side Brunswick Zebras, they haven't had a very good season this year. North Geelong, though, they've apart from the top 2, have really run away with it. North Geelong have been the best of the rest, and they are in 3rd spot. Bailey Gate and Louisa Coombe scored for the Warriors, who will travel to topside Bundoora United this Sunday when they take on the competition leaders at Hillsview Recreation Reserve. That game's at 3 p.m. Lara United travelled to Mill Park and came away with a 5-1 win. Izzy Wilkinson scoring once again, the prolific goal scorer for Lara United. She has now scored 11 this season. But Lily Weiss was the star of the show, scoring 4 goals, her first 4 goals of the season. So a brilliant effort there by Weiss. This Sunday, Lara United travel to Sumner Park to take on Brunswick Zebras, the bottom side. So you would expect them to come away with a win on Sunday. Geelong Rangers, on the other hand, they travelled to Keilor Park Recreation Reserve, where they took on 2nd place Keilor Park. And unfortunately, Keilor Park was just too good for our Rangers, coming out with a 3-1 win. Emma Moran was the lone goal scorer for the Geelong Rangers. And that game this weekend, the Rangers are at home to Caroline Springs George Cross up at Myers Reserve, and that's going to be at 3 p.m. in fact. Now, if we could have a look at the local league very, very quickly, we'll just look at the ladder positions for the men's. men's Division 1 competition. After the first 12 rounds, Surf Coast on top with 25 points, followed by Bell Park with 24. Barn Blue with 20. Armstrong United with 19. They defeated FC Leopold on the weekend. Leopold jump out of the top 4 with 19 points. Breakwater Eagles on 13. Barwon White on 10. Geelong Rangers on 6. And Breakwater and Geelong Rangers have got a game in hand at the moment. And Barwon Heads on the bottom with 11 points. The Women's Division 1 after round 3. We've got Deakin Ducks Black on top with 3 wins from 3 games. That's a good strike rate at the moment. They're followed by Barwon on 7, and then we've got Bell Park and Surf Coast making up the top 4, followed by Drysdale, Armstrong United, Surfside Waves, and Lara United at the bottom. That now brings us to our first guest of the local game segment. It's been it's an absolute pleasure to have this person on. He was the co-founder of FC Leopold back in 2016, and they saw the light of day with their first competition game in 2017. He's also past president of FC Leopold. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Mitch Vials to the show. Mitch, how are you doing?
Yeah, cheers, Tonchi. No, doing well. Yeah, going really well.
Thank you for being very, very patient. We have had some internet issues earlier tonight, but hopefully that's all been rectified. But Mitch, first of all, let's talk about FC Leopold. Back in the day when yourself and Jarred Larkins created the concept of FC Leopold, that was 2016. First competition game was 2017. And now, 7 years later, or 6 years later, I should say, there was a major milestone on the weekend where 2 former juniors made their debut in the senior team. There they are, Will Norris and Lachlan Bartels. Now, tell us all about that. And as a former president and a co-founder, you must be absolutely chuffed with this achievement.
Yeah, 100%, Tonchi. Look, I mean, those boys, I think, started out in, I think it was the under-12s team that we had, probably the first under-12s boys team that we had back in 2017. So, look, to see them, have their first crack at senior football is, look, just fantastic. We've obviously had the same thing happen in our women's team as well. But, yeah, especially for these boys who have been involved from the start is absolutely huge. And, look, I'm sure there'll be hopefully a few more by the end of the year as well. And, we're now at a point, thankfully, where we've got options all the way through. We're going to be able to develop our own senior players as opposed to them, turning up from nowhere, like in year 1. So
yeah. Let's talk about the club at the moment. You're still on the committee as a general committee member, but of the young family, it's a bit difficult now. And I guess there is always that succession plan when you start something. It's good. It's a good time to move on eventually and pass the reins, and that's usually the sign of a healthy club. But tell us some of the highs and lows over the last 6-7 years of the club. And there's been quite a few highs, let me tell you, huh?
Yeah. Firstly, huge amount of work to get things up and running. With Jarred, that was, probably a good 12 months of work sort of behind the scenes, starting from an idea to sort of getting where we are now. Obviously starting from scratch, you're sort of putting your hands up and asking for any help that you can get. So luckily we were able to get some really good people on board early on. As our first committee, and then started advertising, and from there, the numbers have gone up. Every year bar the COVID impacted year, really. Numbers have just kept growing since then. We've had a senior men's team have had a bit of success. Won a grand final, and our junior boys team also won a league. I think it was last year as well. So. The amount of players we've got now, though, it's just exploded. We obviously got the club rooms last year. We got that handed over in the middle of the year. That was huge, for the club. Obviously, before that, we sort of were dealing with a little portable shed that'd been home for 5 odd years. So we were glad to get out of that. But that's probably where now we're in a position to we're a big part of the community now, and we'll be able to continue to grow, which is fantastic.
Speaking of growth, there is an AFL oval right next to Estuary Reserve where you play. Is that being able to be utilised for overflow of training and things like that?
So the issue with that, Tonchi, so we haven't got lights at that facility yet. Look for some of the junior teams. Look, if they can get on there, if there's enough light, if they have an earlier training session, they can get on there and utilize that.
Yeah.
We have been with City of Greater Geelong. We've been lucky enough to get a grant to look into conversion of that into a multi-use facility, and also some lighting. So look, that's probably the next big project for our club is to get our hands on that, get some lighting, because as is the case for a few clubs in Geelong, we're sort of really struggling with the space we've got, especially with the rain. Our pitch hasn't got the best of drainage, so we've got to look after it from that perspective as well. So we're very much looking forward to seeing that happen. And hopefully it's sooner rather than later.
Fantastic. And look, one of the things that FC Leopold really tried and strived hard to do right from the outset was to create a club culture that was welcoming, that was inclusive. And when I say inclusive, it wasn't just males and females, but it was players of all levels and abilities. And you've been able to field two teams, one in Division 1 and one in Division 3. So you've got, I guess, something for everyone. And the juniors now are sort of getting to a stage where even some of the juniors are starting to represent, the Geelong Country Champs as well. Yeah. So you're getting all sorts there as well. What's it like managing the growing ambitions and the growing and the different levels as well as the club starts to get bigger? When the club's small and it's homogenous, it's quite easy. But when you've got some more ambitious than others and all of that, it becomes difficult, doesn't it? Trying to please everyone.
Yeah, it certainly does. Look, we're probably, in some of the teams, we obviously have, more talented and less talented kids, as probably is the case everywhere. But and then also that, from a coaching perspective as well, because we're still so new, Tonchi, we've got people that maybe haven't had any experiences playing football before, and it's their first time. So the challenge is, is that from that perspective that some might not even know the rules. Sort of coming into it, but we've got coaches who've been brave enough to stick their hand up and really keen to learn. Look, I don't know, we as a club try to give them as much support as possible, to give them the skills and be the best coaches they are, so they can support the players and improve their skills. That's probably, especially being in such a footy dominated town, was the toughest point. But everyone's embracing that challenge and. Just the passion that the people we have involved at the club, for me is the most important part. Everyone wants to improve, any aspects of the club, and that puts us in a really positive position moving forward.
Fantastic. Now, look, FC Leopold, one of the smaller clubs, one of the younger clubs in the region, obviously, and we don't get a chance to find out much about the club, but here's that opportunity. Who's the president there these days, or the secretary or the treasurer? Give us a bit of a plug of the committee and maybe some of the coaches as well, at least senior level coaches there at FC Leopold. Yeah, so
at the moment, Aaron Brown put his hand up. Thankfully, it took over from me this year. He's doing a great job of a very busy year again. Obviously, as I said, our numbers have sort of exploded since we've got those new facilities. So, very, very glad that he's put his hand up and he's doing a great job. We've got Lockie Heron is in the secretary role, and Ollie Lynch is in the treasurer role. We've got after that Lisa DeVries is our junior coordinator, who's been doing that for a few years, and she's a absolutely vital cog in our club.
Yep.
Nick Anderson is the senior coordinator, and then we've got a few others as general committee positions, as I am. From the senior coaching, we've got Jarred Gladman, he came on board last year. He's on board again this year, and Nick Anderson is coaching our reserves team as well. And we've got Liam Tench coaching the senior women's team, which Tench has been involved at the club since day dot from a playing perspective. And he's another one who's just done a huge amount for the club.
Yeah, fantastic. Famous name, the Tench name. Liam's dad, Ernie, was involved with a club that only saw the light of day for about 6 months, was called the Western United Rams, a team from Winchelsea, before Western United actually came, and he was heavily involved in that. Unfortunately, I guess just wasn't to be, and that wasn't a club that survived longer than 6 months, but would have been great to have. But big shout out to Liam and Ernie if they are listening. Mate, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for letting us in. The last question, and I'm asking this question of a lot of people lately. It's a shame that the Women's World Cup is now just as the season is almost starting to come to an end. It would have been good if it was in March or something like that, just prior to the season. But are we, as a region, number one, or maybe even closer to home, FC Leopold, are you ready for the expected interest in the game? And do we need to capitalise on this right now, as opposed to waiting until next year, because then things might cool down and interest levels might drop? Are we ready for it, mate?
Yeah, I certainly hope so, Tonchi. Look, it's, the amount of people that obviously getting to the game, to the World Cup games, is just fantastic. So, look, we have to capitalise on it. It's obviously an awkward time, sort of. You might not have players signing up this time of year, given we're sort of past that halfway mark. But, I mean, even just offering them to get involved in training and things like that, and sort of making sure they know if they, on the back of the World Cup, all of a sudden have a new interest in something. I think, every club should be trying to capitalise on that, and getting them down, even just from a social perspective, and possibly get some new players involved, because look, junior girl numbers as well, fingers crossed, absolutely explode next year after this. So time will tell, but no, I'm very positive. I expect numbers to explode.
Well, hopefully on the back of that, hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get lights out there from City of Greater Geelong at Estuary Reserve, and then we can really, really accommodate the expected boom in the World Game. Mitch, thank you once again for joining us on today's show, and we'll just pop that picture up of those two young boys from FC Leopold. How did they go? Were they playing in the reserves team, or were they playing in the first?
That's straight into the deep end, Tonchi.
Wow.
So Will actually played 90 minutes in his first game. He was fantastic, and look, Lockie probably got around half an hour in the game as well. But no, they both did really well. Obviously, I'm sure they were pretty nervous, but as I said, Will played 90 minutes, and to do that after he had his own game in under 16s in the morning was fantastic. I know certainly a few of our older bodies in our team wouldn't be able to back 2 games up like that. So no, we're very glad to have him, and he did fantastic.
Unfortunately, the result there wasn't what they expected. FC Leopold going down 1-2 to it was the battle of the second youngest club against the youngest club, Armstrong United Pelicans, who have only been around since about 2019 or thereabouts, or something like that as well. Mate, thank you for joining us on the show. Wish you all the best, and wish everyone down at FC Leopold all the very best for the rest of the 2023 season.
Cheers, Sanchi. Thanks for having me.
Good on you. Mitch Vials, co-founder and former president of the FC Leopold Football Club. Folks, we're going to take a very, very short break. When we return, we'll be talking to the current president of the Geelong Galaxy United Football Club, MARINA KRASIC. Welcome back to the Game of Two Halves, and we are running a little bit late if you've just joined us, and that was because we had some technical issues for the first 20 or so minutes of the show, but we are back on deck, and we're powering through all of our guests tonight. We've had some great guests. Greg Brown, former Matilda's coach back in the late 90s. We also had the co-founder and former president of FC Leopold, Mitch Vials, and now it's time for our third guest of tonight's show, the president of the Geelong Galaxy United Football Club, MARINA KRASIC. MARINA, welcome back to the Game of Two Halves. It's a pleasure to have you back. We've had you on the show early in the year. Now we've got you midway through the season.
That is correct, Tonchin. I've had a few people comment. I'm back on again. I said, well, what do you want me to say? Yeah. Women's World Cup, Galaxy go hand in hand.
That's exactly right. Now we'll talk about the World Cup and its effects on your club and locally. But let's talk about Galaxy, because since we last spoke, Geelong Galaxy have received a very, very notable recognition from Football Victoria. Tell us a little bit more about the Game Changer accreditation.
Yeah, so look, a little bit of a process, but not too complicated to go through. You'd be familiar enough with the GRFC, the Geelong Regional Football committee. So, we've spoken about there and had Josephine come and talk to the group there. But I don't think a lot of people realise it's actually an initiative by the Australian government. So it's not even exclusive to football, aka soccer either as well. But Football Australia, Football Victoria have done their adaptation of it as well. And the prime focus is exactly on the support of women and girls and how the club is progressing. It's not too complicated to go through and to do. Pull down menus, multiple choice sort of questions, 0 to 25%, that sort of a concept and stuff. But then it did also involve follow-up meetings with Football Victoria, where, again, Josephine was fantastic. She even took the time to catch up with me on a Saturday, just based around working full-time. We were trying to organise things to help step through and allow us to develop an action plan. And then, therefore, how does Football Victoria and the governing body sort of support you with that component? So, I mean, the model is there and the government is behind it. There may be some challenges, as everywhere, with resources as we go through the process in there, but it is great to see that the number one and mandatory module is the women and girls.
What does it mean? Like, once you've got the accreditation, does it help with grants? Does it help with?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's one of the things that they definitely point out with their, again, is sort of showing that you've got a commitment and a plan, and it is broader than the women's and girls. It does talk about the welfare of all players around there. Does even talk about financial stability and that there, but they do sit there going that there'll be priority given towards government grants with those that have achieved through that process coming up. And, definitely we have had a little bit of support even with the Women's World Cup. I mean, I know that the Football Victoria, which was great to see, did provide opportunities for the Nigeria sort of Canada game for people to go attend. Well, fantastic. And it's all over the media, the sales, the records that we've been making. But, it also does give the opportunity for others to go through. So we did get some, first priority tickets, but we do know it got shared out with other clubs too, which was great to see as well.
Now, one of the things this year that has the World Cup obviously has a direct impact on a lot of clubs is the social events that are being formed, the watch parties, whatever you want to call them. But that's been absolutely fantastic to see. Now, you've hosted one and you're hosting one again this weekend at your new club rooms there at Estuary Reserve. We've got some great photos there, the colour, the pomp and ceremony. It just looks like an awesome atmosphere. How was it? How did it go down?
No, it was absolutely fantastic, and logistics come into some of this stuff with volunteers and that as well. So we did have our youth girls on the Thursday night do train out at Northern Bay on the artificial surface there. So we had them finish a little bit earlier, make their way to Estuary Reserve on the way through. Allow them to sit down and have dinner. So great volunteers here in the kitchen. They got to have their meals, cleared up, set up, and then allowed for our seniors and the Carios group of seniors to then finish their training, have all the meals. And I reckon by 8 o'clock, everyone was ready to go. I think we had a minor tech difficulties. She had the tech difficulties. Thankfully, it was at half time. Poor Mario, I think, did get a little bit of heckling. Hasn't paid the Optus bill, but he got it all up and running. And, so it was quite good to watch. And the cheer, when they sort of through, and that was just fantastic. And just lovely for, again, to have the youth and have the younger kids watch it. We're so blessed having it supported here in Australia and New Zealand. It's not which we've all grown up with the 2 a.m., 3 a.m. alarms going off. And a Thursday night. And, the kids had a great time and looking forward to this Thursday night. I will say, though, the Monday night, we're still discussing about what's happening because so many have got tickets to the Matildas and Canada game, being the first Matildas game being hosted as part of the World Cup here in Melbourne. So, we'll be checking what's going on there. Then maybe we'll have the big crowds out there in Amy Park.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, I'm glad you brought that up. It is next Monday that Australia are playing their third World Cup match. And as a result, we will not be on air. We will actually go to air on the following night on Tuesday at 8 p.m. As a result of that, I don't think anyone will be watching our show. In fact, we won't be watching our show. We'll be watching the Matildas as well. But look, that's one of the impacts that you could almost say a direct impact. The Matildas have brought the country together. They've really kind of even such an AFL mad town like Geelong, we in the Geelong Advertiser, I think it was last Wednesday or Thursday, there was an 8-page lift out. You do see occasionally billboards and things like that. So that's obviously having a bit of an effect. But the lasting legacy, I guess, when all the AFL people go back to their sport and this and that, but the rest of the world game fans then, keep on the fire burning, the passion burning. We asked Mitch, are we ready as a sport here in Geelong for the expected increase in interest, particularly from young girls who will want to play? In your opinion, Marina, are we ready? And do we need to do something special over the coming summer months, summer sevens or things like that, to keep that interest going for those that do want to try soccer that have never played it, for example?
Yeah, look, I think clubs will have the challenges. As you know, we've got the continued challenges by all clubs. And while we are all football, sort of soccer passionate around there's a facility, so we'll all do the best that we can with supporting the kids. But the continuity, as you mentioned, we had a bit of a come and try. We were really tagged on at the end of the mini race, which Cryo hosted there at Hume Reserve. But it was great to see the kids all there having a bit of a go from that part. Galaxy, which they have the last summer, will be hosting again a Summer Sevens program going through there. But one of the things, the model that we've had for the last summer for this was participation. So it wasn't the ladder, it wasn't the scoring, and kids could register as individuals and then just be tagged onto the team. So I think that, again, is the continuity. And what's also positive, we have a lot of our players, and my own daughter, she does futsal, and that's not as strong here with the region. And I think that that's such an opportunity that is finally being embraced by Football Victoria in the state, and therefore us as a region. And that gives the kids an opportunity, because a lot do travel to Melbourne, even Ballarat, and some of the other regional areas have stronger futsal, particularly for girls, than what Geelong has got. From that part. So that's something that I think as a continuity will be great to do. So that Summer Sevens participation, having a go, and running it there at the Leisure Time Centre. And then, the futsal as an opportunity as well for the kids to go through and do. We definitely know that the Ballarat girls competition, which I think Western United hosted last season, Shepparton, we're hearing talk about that. And we know a lot of the clubs, community and NPL clubs get behind those tournaments. And not only are they great tournaments, they're also not bad. And Tonchi, I'm sure you've been to them with your children, a great little sort of like a weekend and just a bonding session for the kids, and they're the memories they have.
I had the pleasure of actually going to my first one earlier this year, and as the Boys FC up in Bendigo, and we turned it into a weekend away. And look, the kids loved the fact that we went up there on Friday and they took the day off school. But it was as you say, I'd heard so much about how big it was, and I'd never realised just how big it was until I actually went there. And then obviously there's Girls FC pre-season. But then, as you say, there's the Shepparton Cup coming up in September, October, which apparently is just massive. Yeah. Last year, unfortunately, was the floods, I think, that ruined it. But this year, I'm sure it's going to be just as big, if not better. But that's great to see. And look, I think you're right. I think the momentum that this Women's World Cup, but also just the post-COVID and more kids wanting to turn to soccer for whatever reason, I think that's going to be a big thing as well. And, now more and more kids are going over to Europe as well. We've seen Ben Zilic from North Geelong going over to England. We've seen Anthony Leban, who signed a professional contract in Croatia, the Skoko boys. There's more and more opportunities now starting to open up as well. And people are just starting to realise, well, look, the world's your oyster as far as the world game. And that's that other added appeal, isn't it, of the local game?
Absolutely. And I think it would be remiss, and I have got this as a little note here, Kyra Cooney-Cross, I mean, she needs to be embraced. She wasn't born in Victoria, but she sort of grew up here. And in those days, probably I call it pre-Galaxy, she played with the Ballarat, with the boys team there. But, then was NTC as that came about. But, family, we've got to embrace her as a local Victorian and a local, Torquay Greater Geelong girl. And I know when she's been back in the region, she's come to clubs, she's gone and visited teams, she's come to see our Galaxy and stuff. And if she's had a friend coming to visit the family, she's brought them along too. But I mean, there's a Matilda, so there's a girl that's done the pathway and representing the country, and what a great role model she is. And I don't think she gets recognised enough for her on the field performance as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
big fans.
And that is definitely well worth mentioning, Kyra Cooney-Cross. But there's three players that have played with Galaxy and used Galaxy as a stepping stone to getting into the MPLW Victoria competition. We had Natalie Pitchak, former junior goalkeeper, on last week's shows. If you missed it, folks, go onto our YouTube channel, and it was a great interview. She's only 18 and she's already broken into NPLW Victoria. But two girls two ladies from Galaxy, including last year's captain Emily Sutcliffe and Chrissy Merry, have now gone on to Burundara Carey Eagles, who are doing very, very well in the NPLW competition. Can you envisage a lot of other juniors from Galaxy making the jump? Because we've had some very, very young players make the grade in the last couple of years at senior level. So there's some great potential coming up through the ranks, isn't there?
Yeah, look, I mean, absolutely. And look, I mean, you touched on before you went through the ladder. I mean, we're still pushing and on the edge of getting into the top four there with Galaxy, with our senior women. But I mean, Aya is leading goal scorer for the league at the moment, which is fantastic. But, it's being supported. I may get my number slightly off, Tonchi, in my rounding, but last weekend we may have had actually 5, but we've got 5 under-17 players on rotation in the senior squad, which is, great. And I think only 2 of them will age out from under-17s next season. So that just shows you, by the NPL model, their bottom age under-17, but it just shows you, again, the development and the depth that we've got coming through. And you are correct as well, I think, even over the pathway from Galaxy, because the other one as well, I think, I'd like to give a shout out, while not from the playing perspective, but, Kat Smith sort of started her career as the coach and was a head coach when Galaxy made the grand final.
Correct.
Back into that period. And, now she's, the head coach of the Western Sydney Wanderers, A-League. So, again, developed their skill set, contributed as well to the local competition and progressing further. And then performance-wise, showing the potential, our under-13s, who are also doing extremely well, bet 2-0 on the weekend. South Melbourne, who, a bit of a powerhouse club and top of the ladder. So, that was a great result. And I think, surprised a few people from South Melbourne. And we've been competitive against them in the past sort of stuff. But, but that was great for our juniors. And a couple of these were the juniors that were in last year's Victorian schoolgirls competition. So, you can see it from that young group going through the under-17s. And as we've touched on, progressing all the way through the NPLW. So we're developing well here, and we're being very well represented from the region.
Brilliant, thank you. See, we had a lot to talk about, lot to talk, and that's the beauty. There's so much happening at the moment, and obviously Galaxy United and the Women's World Cup and the VPL. Sorry, there is so much to talk about. Marina, thank you for joining us on the show. Wishing you all the best for the rest of the season, and indeed the off season looks like it's going to be a very, very busy off season, but that's the way we like it, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Good on. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Marina Krasic, the president of Geelong Galaxy United, thank you very much for being a part of tonight's show. Also, all right, thank you, folks. Look, once again, sincere apologies about the little internet problems we had early in the show, but as we got through it, and you were with us throughout the show tonight as well. Thank you so much for that. Just a reminder, next week's show will be on at Tuesday night at 8 p.m. because the Matildas will be in action on Monday night at 8 p.m. And obviously that game will be at Amy Park. So we certainly hope that you'll be able to watch that game and then watch us on the Tuesday night. We've got a major announcement to be made next week's show. Right at the start, we won't keep you waiting too long, but it will be right at the very, very start. That's something you do not want to miss, okay? And apart from that, thank you once again to Euro football star who was the major sponsor of the Game of Two Halves podcast for the first 15 episodes. Unfortunately, that sponsorship deal ceases as of tonight's show, but we do sincerely thank them for their support over the first 15 episodes of this year's season. That leaves us with nothing else but to say have a lovely, lovely week. Enjoy the rest of this week. And just a reminder about the Oz Crow Soccer Show podcast, which I co-host with my colleague from Sydney, Ante Grabovats. That will be on this Wednesday at 8 p.m. And as part of this week's episode, we will have an exclusive interview with former Geelong boy Anthony Leban, who has just signed a professional contract in Croatia. He'll tell us all about that, and he'll be joining us. And that episode will be simulcast live on the Geelong Region Soccer News Facebook page. Until Wednesday night, or until next Tuesday night, good night, and thank you for being a part of this show.